I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Angela.
We are the Ink Mages. Join us as we discuss all things fantasy, world building, storycraft, myths and legends, and of course, our own imaginative stories. Welcome to the Ink Mages podcast. We are so excited that you are here. Today, we are going to be talking about writer's block. Now, Angela, I know you have a unique take on writer's block. So why don't you start off the conversation?
Writer's block itself is something that really doesn't have to be a stumbling block. I actually, in some ways, don't believe that it has to exist or be a part of a writer's experience. But I think there's some questions we have to ask ourselves when we're experiencing writer's block. Because of course, I say it's a mindset or that it really doesn't have to exist. But I've experienced moments where I could have allowed writer's block to really have its way while I was writing my book. Some of the questions you might ask yourself are you well rested? Are you exhausted? Because if you're really tired, that's a huge indication that maybe you don't have writer's block, but you're fatigued, you're exhausted, your creativity isn't flowing. Are you stressed out? Is there a lot going on in your life emotionally? Sometimes we think we have writer's block, but really what we need to do is slow down and observe ourselves. I've noticed when I am stressed or I'm going through something really dramatic, I know that both Stephanie and we experienced our city burning down at one point while we were writing our books. And that definitely took a toll on us emotionally. I think there was one point where we were having a conversation and it was like, what's the point? What's the point of writing and being creative in the midst of chaos and trauma? Well, yes, it's so important. Words are important. Stories are important. Creativity is important. But when those kind of traumas come against your mindset, it's hard to find your why. And at times like that with writer's block, I know for me, it does help to actually step back and you need to read a book or you need to journal and get your emotions out. So especially if you're feeling stressed, that's a way to unstop the writer's block. Another thing is, are you putting too much pressure on yourself? Are you putting unrealistic time constraints? And we can break these down as we have this conversation, but those kind
That's a big one for me. I'll just say that.
Yes. I've done that to myself too, where I'm like, I need to finish this by a certain date. There was no reason. My publisher wasn't like on my back about me finishing anything, but I had set an unrealistic date. In fact, I do this all the time because I like to goal set, but I will set my goal a little too, it's too much. Like I can't meet that deadline. And I find that I'm not my creative best because I'm not being realistic with myself. And I think one of the other things that I struggle with, and these are all things you want to tackle before we're actually even talking about writer's block, right? These are just things that make us think maybe we're having writer's block, but thinking about your audience more than your own creative voice. When you start thinking about all of the things that you need to do to make your audience happy, or really especially when it's your first draft, the most important piece is just getting your story out. When you're more concerned about other people and you're more concerned about what your audience is hearing, or perfectionism, that's a huge one. Trying to be a perfectionist and edit your work as you're going, that is going to really slow down the process and make you start experiencing writer's block. But again, these are things that come in that just inhibit the flow of our creativity. But I know for me, once you get past those things, like you've measured your internal thermometer and it's okay, maybe I'm not stressed, I'm well rested, all of these, I've ticked all these boxes, but now I'm still experiencing this writer's block. And I know for me, I didn't experience a whole lot of writer's block, but I had a lot of times where I didn't feel like writing, or I wasn't sure how to write a scene. I know, and Stephanie could probably elaborate on this, I'm not a pantser, I'm a plotter. So for me, I knew how the story was going to go, but I didn't know how to get to where I wanted to go. And at those moments, honestly, I throw out perfectionism about having to have the scene perfect, because that can really slow down your flow and make you feel like you can't keep writing. And I just kind of decide in those moments, I'm going to keep writing and I'm going to make a big mess. I'm just going to write it however it comes back. I can go back to it later and I can refine it, but I need to get to the next part of the story. And I'm not the type, I think Stephanie's expressed that has different ways of navigating her writing. I can't go to another part of my story and then come back. I actually have to get through the mucky bits so that I can get to where I want to write. Like for me, I have to be very linear with my writing. So I really concentrate very hard when it comes to those points where I just press through and I make a really big mess and I don't feel like writing. I don't feel like what I'm writing is good. It feels jumbly. It's not how I want it to sound, but I get through it onto the other side. And it's really helpful for me when I do that, because when I do that and I get to the next part, then that rush, that wind comes back to me, the place I want to write, the parts of the story I want to write. And I do get to go back to those other parts of the story that were harder to write. And I find I've at least built a structure, which is really helpful for me. But I think one of the most serious forms of writer's block I've ever experienced was when you discover you have a plot hole in your story and you have to fix it. And for me, it wasn't about, I think writer's block, it's more like, I have no ideas. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how I can rearrange it. The puzzle was beyond my own self. I would sit there and I would think and I would think and I'd think, how can I fix this problem without just wrecking the rest of my story? Plot holes are doozies for real. That was probably the biggest case of writer's block I've ever had. And for me, there was still a solution. And the solution was, I don't have the idea. So I have to go find a friend that can help me unclog my brain and give me ideas. And I know for me, that was Stephanie and my husband. I was like, listen, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to move on with my story. I have been sitting here and it's not happening. And I think that's a huge piece of advice that I can offer to people who are writers, is stop doing it alone.
Yes.
Sometimes we have writer's block because we're trying to contrive all of our ideas on our own. And sometimes you need somebody else to feed the creative fuel. And there's something about, just spiritually, when we get in a room with other creatives, we start talking to other writers, that percolates our creative meter and makes us start just flushing out all of the stuff that's hindering our ability to write. And I know for me, when I hit that huge plot hole, I had a plot hole in my story where a character shouldn't have been where they were and it didn't make sense. And so I had to rearrange all of my characters and I didn't know how to do that. And honestly, it only took a few conversations for people who weren't stuck in my story to have simple ideas and simple solutions to resolve all of my problems. And it meant I just had to change a few little things in a few other chapters, and then the main portion of my story that had the plot hole, and it was fixed. And I no longer had the writer's block. I no longer had that mental block that kept me from moving forward. And I think that's the important thing to understand, is it's a mental block. It's not a thing. Writer's block, it's not a thing. There's circumstances that make us feel limited, but there are solutions to writer's block. There's ways to navigate and get our creativity back. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead and let us know a little bit about your experience with writer's block?
Well, I'll say that you hit a lot of points that I have dealt with. So exhaustion and stress are big ones for me. So when I find that I am putting pressure on myself, like a deadline, I need to get this fixed or get this done by a certain amount of time, my creativity really suffers, because now I just feel the stress that I've put on myself, and I don't necessarily have deadlines. I put them on myself. So I've learned that I need to give myself grace in those situations, and just tell myself, hey, I am at my own pace. It is okay to go at a certain pace. I struggle with anxiety at times. So when I feel like this uncertainty and like these anxiety spikes, it's my cue to say, okay, you need to step away from the computer. And I do that. So, I take a walk, I will go work out, and I find that exercise is a big cure for these mental writer block situations. I've found when I've had little holes or I feel stuck in the story, when I go work out and I'm listening to music and like endorphins are going, I find breakthrough. So I'll be analyzing the scene through my mind, and then I'll have aha moments where all of a sudden I figure it out or the characters are talking. So then I get unstuck. So I found the best way for me is just to step away from the screen and go do something else, go cook maybe. That was a recent thing that happened to me. I was hating a scene that I was writing between two of my characters in book 3 of the Iron Kingdom series. So it was between Tahira and Zuri. And I'm like, what needs to come across in this scene? Like, I need more oomph. I need more weight. You know, this is the first time they're interacting together. So, like, what needs to be expressed? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm leaving because I don't like it. But then I go immediately, like 2 minutes, I go to cook. And then all of a sudden, the character, Zuri, starts talking to me and gives me this whole monologue of her inner turmoil and answers to a bunch of questions. And I'm like, aha, here's the nugget. Here's the piece, the takeaway that I needed for this scene. So I encourage people, if you're staring at a screen and it's just not flowing, take a break. Mental
Stepping
break.
away is such a big deal. I mean, for me, I never want to step away. I'm like, no, now's the time. I want to write right now. I don't want to step away. And I will argue with myself. And I don't know how many times when I just even like, okay, fine, I stand up and I'll just go get myself a cup of coffee. And on my way to getting the cup of coffee, the ideas unlock just because I was willing to stop for a minute and walk away.
Yes. And I think another thing you said, what was it? Throw out perfection.
Yes.
Okay. When you're writing your first draft, this needs to be your motto. Because I really think it will help your mindset. I know I've seen memes or little posts out there where it says the first draft is just me telling the story, or I'm reminding myself in the first draft that I have to shovel the dirt in order to get to the diamond. So those little things will go through my mind as I'm writing the first draft because I write very clean. Okay. So my rough drafts are usually not rough. And maybe that's my editing background, but I sometimes have to just tell myself, hey, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, this is my first draft and I just need to kind of figure out the story. So, you know, Angela will like just dig and fight to get through those scenes, you know, and then that is a way for sure. And I think there have been times where I've done that too. So, you know, it's just if you keep that mindset that it doesn't have to be perfect, throw that out, you will, I think, have an easier time finishing that manuscript.
Perfection is a killer of creativity.
Yes.
Without a doubt. And I don't know how many people I've talked to who they have been writing their book for years, years and years and years, and they're still in the first few chapters because they keep rewriting and rewriting, trying to make it perfect before they feel like they can move on. And that is just, it will kill you in comparison, will kill your creativity. It's hard, especially when you're reading other people's works, to not diminish the power of what you're writing or the beauty of what you're writing, because now all of a sudden you're looking at somebody else's writing and thinking, oh my gosh, they're so much better than I am. And the truth is that's probably not a real thing. It's your own insecurity that's creating this comparison.
Yeah.
Nobody's writing is exactly the same. And we get to, just like artists, have a creative way of expressing our stories. And when we're being perfectionists and we're comparing ourselves to other people, boy, that will really hinder from getting anywhere in your story. I like to always say, free yourself to make a big fat mess when you're writing. Just make a mess. And I know I'm the opposite of Stephanie. When I write and I go back and reread what I've written, oh my gosh, the words that I've missed, the misspellings that I didn't realize I've misspelled, or the extra words that I added. But again, the bones are there. So when I go back, it's already been built. And then I can go back and clean it up. But the hard work really was done. So you have to be willing to just move past everything being perfect and realize that this isn't the draft that's going to go and get published. This is just you getting your story.
Yeah, that's important. And if you do feel like you're stuck or you don't know where to go, ask someone, and it doesn't have to be a writer. Angela made a good point that just asking a reader is a great way. I will ask my sister, Liz, and she has been my creative partner for years, started in childhood when we created our own stories together and brainstorming. And when we would get stuck, we're like, okay, let's just destroy everything and start over. Let's kill a character. We were doing that at 5 and 7. So I will go to her and I'll say, hey, this is my dilemma. This is where I'm at. And I kind of need this to happen for my ending. What are your thoughts? And she'll give me good advice. She's not a writer. Like, she doesn't write, but she's a very creative person and she watches a lot of different shows. So she has been a good person to go to. I do have some critique partners. Angela, you're amazing. So I go to you too when I need to hash this out. So having a mix of writer critique partners and then just people who read books or who love stories. That's a thing too. Someone who loves stories and they can tell you, maybe that's not the best approach. What about this? And I've had wonderful success with both.
Absolutely. I love how it doesn't have to be a writer. Anybody who enjoys a good story can give you feedback, especially if you're feeling blocked or you have a plot hole, because sometimes stories can become puzzles where, maybe your eyeballs aren't finding that missing piece, but somebody else can come in and see it immediately because they haven't been staring at it for hours and hours and hours. They can immediately see that little piece and plug it right in for you. And one of my most favorite stories of the Inklings, C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien, is that they were having lunch or dinner together. I don't remember the exact details, but J.R. Tolkien's publisher had said, hey, I want you to write more books about hobbits. And he was having a hard time coming up with anything besides describing the Hobbit village and how hobbits live. And if you read Lord of the Rings, you'll see there's chapters and lots of writings at the beginning of that story where he just talks about Hobbiton and what hobbits do. And that was in the middle of his writer's block. He was like, I don't know how to write a story more than I have about hobbits. And he was talking with C.S. Lewis saying, I don't know where to go with this story. And C.S. Lewis said, hobbits are best when they're not doing hobbity things. And that line right there was enough to unstop J.R. Tolkien's inability to not continue on with the story. Now he had this whole idea of like, wow, I can actually take the hobbits out of Hobbiton and I can create this adventure of hobbits not doing hobbity things. And that's the power of being around somebody else who can help inspire ideas. It was J.R.R. Tolkien who obviously was the one who initiated the story. He was the one that got to craft how it started to come out after his conversation. But it was just those fine words from C.S. Lewis that helped him realize there was more to his hobbits than just Hobbiton. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I know. I love that story. It's so simple. Hobbits not doing hobbity things.
Yes. I think there's a lot that we can be inspired by when it comes to the Inklings. And if I could recommend any book to writers or creatives in general, it's the book Bandersnatch, which is about the Inklings, because there's kind of an amazing example that they set up for us as far as what it looks like when creatives, writers gather together and they begin to do their craft in a unit, as a people, encouraging each other into their creative craft. And I think that's where another area where for me helps unblock my writer's block is when I'm losing my energy, I'm losing my steam. I'm not really sure where I want to take my story or how to develop a scene. Like Stephanie said, when you step back and you go watch a movie or read somebody else's book, for me, that's huge. Like, go get entertained. Go remember how stories are told.
Yes.
Go remember how an adventure goes and enjoy yourself. It's amazing how much that shifts things.
Sometimes you just need to go have fun. So my husband is always like on me when he sees that I am stressed, and it can be with my own writing or with the editing. And he will encourage me to like, hey, take a break. You never take a day off. I really don't. That's the thing. Like every day I could be writing or editing or doing something that has to do with writing or books. So he'll say, go play your video game because you haven't played in 2 weeks, if he notices. And I'll go do that. So it's like I'll give myself that freedom, that space, and that grace to go do something, reward myself for the work I've done, and I go play. And video games are great because I'm interacting with a story. I mean, every game I play is like a role-playing game. It's an RPG. So I get to go be immersed in a story for a bit. I get to do some hand-eye coordination and relax. So that's my form of relaxation, is reading other books and playing video games. So, when someone tells you and they notice, like a family or a friend, like, hey, give yourself a break, take some you time. It's okay to do that.
Yeah. On top of that, another way to unclog your creativity that sometimes I forget about is having fun. And then when you go to bed at night, allow your own story to just meditate on it. Think about your characters. Think about the parts. Like I'll go back through my story and think about the parts that I've written well or that I enjoy about my characters, and really go to sleep thinking about my story. And it's amazing how often when my brain is relaxed and I'm not trying to force anything, how it will start to roll. And by the next morning, I'll have woken up with fresh ideas to write.
Yes. I feel I do this nightly. I do that. Kind of now that my brain is relaxed, my body's at a state of rest, I can kind of rehearse scenes in my mind, but then I have to eventually pull the plug on it or else I'll never sleep. But I can get breakthrough right before bed, like, oh, okay, a character starts talking, write it down. You have to write it down or you won't remember. So make sure you get it in your notes or notebook. And then it feels great because, as Angela said, that next morning you wake up and you already have a plan of attack. You already have somewhere to start because you gave yourself a little bit of time before bed as you're winding down to kind of, okay, let's revisit that scene, and maybe you'll get like unstuck because your characters are talking. Yeah. So it's awesome.
Tool was exactly what helped me recently. Stephanie had read my rough draft of book 3 and realized that I had kind of brought some characters into the story without really giving enough background or enough pull to bring in the sort of storyline that I had brought in. And I remember I was laying in bed. I was kind of stressing out about it a little bit because I'm like, okay, she's right. I really need to fix this. It wasn't necessarily a plot hole, but it was something that needed to be developed. And so I was just laying there, my eyes were closed, and I was thinking about my character. And then all of a sudden, it was like the angels were singing. I suddenly had this very clear thought and solution as to how I could just, even in a very small few paragraphs, bring in just enough oomph so that when those characters experience this really powerful moment, there was already a draw previous in the story. So that really worked for me because that was another one of those moments where you're like, I don't know. I hadn't thought of that. It wasn't part of my initial story idea, and I just didn't know where to go with it. And it came. It just popped right into my brain. So
yay, I'm so glad it did. Now I'm excited to see how you worked that in. Oh. Yeah, writer's block really is, it's all mental. If that's the takeaway, it's such a mindset thing, and we can let it control us, or we can kind of conquer it by asking those questions that you started the video with.
Absolutely. And being exhausted and stressed and experiencing real life trauma and all of those things that happen in life, those are okay things to walk through. And maybe, like I said, pause Maybe just like working out, I always think for me personally, I don't want to stop working out because once I stop working out, I don't want to go back to the gym, or it takes me forever to get motivated to get back to the gym. And for writing, I don't want to stop because sometimes it does take me a whole bunch of effort to get remotivated to start again if I've stopped. But
Yes.
sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean writing the story that you're currently writing or pressing through and overcoming and just putting too much pressure on yourself when maybe you're not in a place that you need to be doing that. You maybe need to be massaging your imagination and massaging your emotions and pick up a journal and write.
Yeah.
You're still writing, you're still practicing your creativity, you're still getting words out on paper, but you're not forcing yourself maybe when you're not there at the moment.
Yes. And I know I've heard people really struggle with writing after like a book has come out. So I can think of several friends and even myself included where your first book comes out and then it's like, okay, I need to write the sequel. And then it's like nothing's coming. And I think a lot of that can stem from just being overtaxed with getting that first book out. Like you exhausted yourself. There was so much excitement. And now it's like the excitement is kind of ebbing away. And now it's like you got to get back into work mode or writing mode. And it can be a struggle. And I know I've been experiencing this as I've been trying to write book 3 in the Iron Kingdom series. And I think because my second book is on, it's going to be coming out in December, and I had to spend a lot of time doing revisions, getting the arc stage ready. And now I have the Heartsmith that's in development. It's almost ready for development edit. So it's like, wow, now I've got 2 series that I'm doing. So I've got 2 works in progress at the same time. And it can be hard. Like, wow, how do I juggle writing 2 books at once, plus having a social media presence and making posts and like promoting the first book that's out? It's a lot. So I think writing a schedule, maybe making a list of things you need to tackle each day will help, because this is all about, you're managing your stress level, your mental health. So if you find I need to take a break from social media for a week, do it. Okay. If you were like, anytime I sit down to start writing, it's just like I'm getting pings and notifications, maybe turn off the notifications and just, I'm going to really focus on writing this week and set a goal, set a realistic goal. Maybe it's just 1,000 words for the week. Maybe it's 5,000, but setting a goal will help. And again, maybe you need to reread your story like the previous one. Read something that's in the same genre that will help inspire you. And just reading another book that's like, this is so cool. It will make me want to go into my world and just create. So yeah, this is all important.
I think that's a really valuable point that you brought up, because most people who are authors and writers don't realize, maybe if you're just starting out, how you also have to become a professional marketer on social media. Like that's a big part of being an author. And that's such a valid thing to pay attention to, that social media doesn't eat you, that you maintain control of what it is that you're doing, almost get a vision for what you're doing with social media, and make it okay to take a break, because it can become a really, really big pressure to keep up with social media and be on there all of the time. And it's not healthy. And it is important to be on social media, to be getting out there, but you can't let it eat you. You can't, I always say, you get to control social media. Don't let social media control you. Or the same thing, don't let marketing control you. You control it. And keeping in that place, in that presence where it's not starting to rob from your creativity or rob from your rest and causing stress and all of the things that we talked about that can cause writer's block, just simply because our bodies are exhausted, our minds exhausted, we're doing too many things. And I love what you said, Stephanie. Yes, make a schedule. Be a little intentional with your time. Don't let your time run away with you. because that in itself will help you rest so you can be creative. I know for me, I am a little anal, but I have to keep my house clean so that when I write, I'm not thinking about, oh my gosh, I have the dishes to do. I have to vacuum. I'm a mom. I have all of these things that I need to do, and I don't have time to write. So I'm very intentional with keeping my house clean and making sure I keep on top of it, just so that when I get to create and write, I am not distracted with the chaos. Some people, chaos doesn't bother them, but for me, I'm very stimulated by what my eyes see. And if I see a mess, I'm immediately stressed and I can't create. So I keep everything real nice and neat. That's my OCD. I'll raise my hand and say, yes, you're right. Maybe it's an issue. But for me, it's something that I take control of so that I can be creative and I'm not worried about all of the things that are going undone while I'm creating, and putting my phone on silent so that I'm not being distracted while I'm writing.
Yeah. My phone is always on silent or vibrate, but yeah, the notifications do go off and the screen lights up, but it could be if you just have to set it aside. I'll go let it charge and then go write in a different room.
Yes.
That's one way. Because I think distractions can be a big cause of the writer's block too. You just can't get in the zone because you are constantly being bombarded from outside things, a messy house possibly. So maybe that could be your break time to go clean something. Now, I will share something that has been really helpful for me in getting my word count goals. If you are someone who likes to watch or have music on while you write, there is a YouTube channel by Abbie. It's either Emmons or Simmons. And she has these writing videos where it'll be for 2 hours. Just this cool music is playing, and it'll be in 25-minute blocks, time blocks. And then there's a 5-minute break. So there's like a couple fantasy ones. There's like a Norse one. There's a romance one. She's got a bunch. But I have found it has been so helpful because I know if I put that video on, like on my TV, while I go write over on the desk, for 2 hours, I'm locked in to this 25-minute increments with 5-minute breaks. So when I hear that 5-minute chime, it's like, okay, I can step away, stretch, go water the plants, go get a snack. And then I come back and it's like 25 minutes, back on the clock, get in the zone. So that's one tip I will encourage. I'm locked in for this 25 minutes, take the 5-minute break, then another 25 minutes. This is why I was able to get on book 3, my word count was just going super high when I was doing this, super fast. I was writing like 5,000 words or more a week. Then I had to stop because I had editing things to do. But I'm slowly getting back into that. So if that's only the time you have in a day is 2 hours, clock it. And then the rest of the day can be other things that you need to take care of.
2 hours or 5 minutes. If you're putting writing in, you should pat your back.
Yeah.
And I think, Stephanie, maybe we should put that link to that YouTube in on the channel. So we'll be putting that link in so that you guys can find that, because music can really be helpful. Noise canceling headphones can be helpful. Signs on the door to your children that mommy's writing, or whatever you need to do to make sure that your space stays the way it needs to. I have a friend who wrote a book and she said, I learned to be comfortable with chaos around me while I wrote. So you have to know yourself and you have to teach yourself. Sometimes you if you go, oh, I just can't write because, well, we're all learning new skills in life. And if we're meant to write, then we find a way to hurdle those obstacles and create spaces where we can write. Well, I think that this has been a really fun, interesting conversation. And I think that, hey, if you have any solutions or ideas that you have to conquer writer's block, we'd love for you to leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear what you do to create your own writer's space, how you have navigated times of hardship. We'd also love to hear if this was helpful for you. And please let us know if there is something that you would love us to talk about on the Ink Mages. We definitely have heard from some of you that you would like to hear about character development. We definitely plan to do an episode on character development, and we have some author interviews coming up for you very, very soon. We're very excited about that. And please leave a like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.